The arrival of the invaders. The night sky was never the same again. It started as a whisper in the dark, a shadow moving among the stars. Then, without warning, the sky cracked open with fire. They had arrived. A fleet of massive ships hovered over Earth, blocking out the sun in some places. They were not like anything seen before. Their surfaces shimmered like liquid metal, shifting and changing shape as if they were alive. The world watched in silence, holding its breath, waiting for the first message. It came, cold and merciless. Surrender or be erased. The words echoed in every language, spoken directly into the minds of millions. The invaders, known only as the Accelerated Dominion, had conquered thousands of planets. They never lost a war. They never showed mercy. And now, Earth was next. The world unites. Panic spread across the planet. Governments scrambled to respond. World leaders held emergency meetings. Scientists, generals, and strategists all gathered in secret bunkers, trying to understand the enemy. But there was one problem. There was nothing to understand. The Accelerated did not negotiate. They did not explain. They only gave orders. And when orders were ignored, they destroyed. In a hidden military base, Commander Elias Drake stared at the screen in front of him. The images were horrifying. Entire cities of other planets wiped out. Their people turned to dust. The Accelerated left behind only ruins and silence. Drake clenched his fists. "Not this time," he muttered. Beside him, a scientist named Dr. Evelyn Carter adjusted her glasses. "We need to fight smart. They are stronger, faster, and their technology is beyond us. But they have never fought humans before." Drake nodded. "Then we show them who we are." The first attack. The Accelerated did not wait long. Within hours of their message, they sent their first wave. Small, insect-like drones swarmed the skies, scanning the cities, mapping the land. Then came the real force. Tall, armored machines that walked like giants, crushing everything in their path. Earth's defense forces fought back with everything they had. Fighter jets launched missiles, tanks fired heavy rounds, and soldiers unleashed every weapon available. But the enemy was prepared. Bullets bounced off their armor. Missiles exploded, doing little damage. The Accelerated marched forward, cold and unstoppable. But then, something strange happened. One of their machines suddenly froze. Then another, and another. A strange energy crackled in the air. The Accelerated commander, watching from his ship, narrowed his glowing eyes. "What is this?" he hissed. Dr. Carter, monitoring from a command center on Earth, gasped. "They don't understand our planet's energy fields. Their machines are advanced, but Earth itself is resisting them." The Accelerated were strong, but they had never fought a world like this. The first mistake. Thinking Earth was weak, the Accelerated underestimated humanity. But humans were not just warriors. They were survivors. Across the world, resistance groups formed. Civilians fought back with whatever they had. Engineers hacked into enemy drones. Scientists studied their weaknesses. And something else was happening, something even that Accelerated could not predict. Their machines, built for efficiency, struggled with human chaos. Unlike other species that surrendered quickly, humans were unpredictable. They did not follow patterns. They did not break under fear. They adapted. And the Accelerated had never faced a species that refused to give up. The warning. Inside the Accelerated command ship, the supreme strategist received a message from one of his officers. "Sir, our calculations were incorrect. The humans are resisting. We have encountered something strange." The supreme strategist turned, his expression unreadable. "Strange." The officer hesitated. "Yes, sir. Earth fights back. It is not just the people. The planet itself is interfering with our systems." The supreme strategist frowned. This was not possible. Planets did not fight back. Civilizations fell when the Accelerated arrived. That was how it had always been. And yet here was Earth, defiant, resisting. He made a decision. Prepare the next wave. No more warnings. Earth will burn. The final stand begins. Back on Earth, Dr. Carter watched the night sky. More enemy ships were arriving, filling the heavens with their monstrous forms. The war had just begun. She turned to Commander Drake. They are bringing everything this time. Drake nodded. Then we give them nothing. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. And the Celleri were about to learn a lesson no empire had ever survived. They should have respected Earth. The first battle. Earth's hidden strength. The Celleri did not believe in second chances. When the first wave of their machines stalled, when their scanners failed to predict human movements, they did not pause. They did not reassess. They did not ask why. They only escalated. At exactly midnight, the sky turned red. Massive pillars of energy shot down from the alien warships, burning through skyscrapers, forests, and oceans. The air itself shimmered with heat. Millions ran for shelter, but there was nowhere to hide. The invasion had begun in full force. Inside an underground military bunker, Commander Elias Drake watched the destruction on a dozen different screens. Fires raged. Cities fell. But what struck him most was the silence. The Celleri never spoke. They never gave demands. They simply erased everything in their path. He clenched his jaw. How long before our counterstrike is ready? A young officer hesitated. Sir, our weapons barely scratched their first wave. What can we possibly? Drake slammed his fist on the table. We are humans. We don't give up. The room went quiet. Then another voice spoke. They don't understand us, said Dr. Evelyn Carter, her eyes scanning the data screens. They think we're like every other race they've conquered. She adjusted her glasses. That's their mistake. Drake exhaled sharply. Then let's teach them a lesson. The unexpected resistance. Across the world, Earth's forces fought back. Fighter jets soared through the burning skies, dodging plasma blasts and launching missiles at the enemy. Soldiers on the ground used whatever they had. Machine guns, tanks, explosives. Civilians hacked into alien drones, turning them against their masters. Engineers repurposed captured enemy tech. But something strange was happening. The Celleri should have crushed Earth in minutes. Their weapons were beyond anything humans had ever seen. Their warships were built to conquer entire star systems. And yet, they struggled. Their targeting systems glitched. Their machines moved slower than before. Some of their warships even shut down mid-air, falling like broken toys. On the Celleri flagship, Supreme Strategist Sinar watched the battle unfold. His expression was unreadable, but deep inside, something stirred. Confusion. This is impossible, one of his officers whispered. The human should not be lasting this long. Sinar narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. Explain. The officer hesitated. We do not know, Supreme Strategist. The planet itself interferes with our systems. Something in its atmosphere, its energy fields. Our machines are not operating at full efficiency. Sinar turned back to the screen, watching as human forces pushed forward, adapting, resisting. It made no sense. Every species they had ever faced surrendered within hours. Empires had fallen before them without a fight. Their technology was superior. Their calculations were flawless. And yet, Earth was not following the pattern. The fear they never felt before. Back in the bunker, Dr. Carter studied the readings. This isn't just about our weapons, she murmured. This planet is rejecting them. Drake frowned. What do you mean? She turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. Earth is fighting back. The Celleri don't understand it. They think only in terms of technology and power. But there's something else at work here, something they didn't predict. Drake stared at her. Are you saying Earth is alive? Carter didn't answer. But deep in her mind, an old thought formed. a forgotten theory from ancient human history. Legends of civilizations that had vanished without a trace, entire empires that had risen and fallen, all with one common factor. They had all underestimated Earth. And now, the XLRA were making the same mistake. The first Cellary defeat. As the battle raged, something happened that had never occurred in Cellary history. They lost. One of their massive warships, a structure the size of a city, started to descend. Not by choice. Systems failed. Controls stopped responding. The XLRA inside screamed in panic as their invincible vessel plummeted toward the ocean. In the bunker, Drake's radio crackled with a single message from the front line. "We took one of their ships down. Repeat, one of their ships is down." The room erupted into cheers. But Drake's face remained tense. He turned to Carter. "How?" She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's not over." Outside, in the burning skies of Earth, the Cellary fleet hovered in silence. The supreme strategist watched as humans, weak, fragile, unworthy, stood their ground. A cold realization crept into his mind. They had planned for every possibility, every counterattack, every strategy. But they had never planned for this. They had never planned for defeat. The next move. The Cellary did not feel fear. Not in the way lesser species did, but what they felt now was something close. The supreme strategist's voice was like steel. "Enough playing. Activate the cleansing weapon." A deep, ominous hum vibrated through the alien fleet. A light, brighter than the sun, began to form at the center of their flagship. Drake saw it from the bunker. His blood ran cold. "What the hell is that?" Dr. Carter's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're done fighting us." She swallowed. "They're going to wipe out the planet." The room fell silent. Every screen showed the same thing. A growing pulse of energy, preparing to erase Earth from existence. This was no longer just a war. This was extinction, and humanity had only minutes left to stop it. The secret they never considered. For the first time in their long history, the Cellary Dominion felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not frustration, something deeper. Doubt. The cleansing weapon activates. Above Earth, the Cellary flagship pulsed with raw energy. Their final weapon, the cleansing pulse, was charging, designed to erase all organic life on a planet in a single burst. It had never failed. It had wiped out entire civilizations, reduced mighty empires to dust. On board, Supreme Strategist Sinar stood motionless, watching the energy core glow brighter. His officers worked in perfect silence, their movements precise. This was routine. This was inevitable. And yet, something felt wrong. Earth was different. It had resisted longer than any species before it. It had turned their own technology against them. And now, in the final moments before destruction, the humans did not beg. They did not send messages of surrender. They did not kneel. They fought. The countdown to extinction. In Earth's underground command bunker, alarms blared. Dr. Evelyn Carter's fingers flew over the keyboard, analyzing the data. "We have less than 3 minutes before they fire that weapon." Commander Elias Drake paced behind her, eyes locked on the satellite feeds. The flagship's energy core was glowing like a second sun, ready to release its deadly pulse. A young soldier's voice cracked through the radio. "Sir, do we have a plan?" Drake exhaled. He had faced impossible odds before. He had fought battles he was supposed to lose. But this was different. This was the end. Unless... Dr. Carter suddenly froze, her eyes widening. "Wait." Drake turned. "What?" She pointed at the screen. "The energy field around Earth. It's reacting to their weapon." Drake squinted. "What do you mean, reacting?" She hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "It's fighting back. The ghosts of the past." Sinar watched the final preparations in silence. All systems ready. An officer reported. Weapon at 98% charge. Xenar's fingers twitched. His mind raced through calculations, probabilities, outcomes. They had conquered 10,000 worlds. There was no logical reason to hesitate. And yet, a strange unease settled over him. Something ancient, something forgotten. An old record buried deep within the Cellary archives. A warning. Do not go to Earth. It was the last message from a long-dead civilization, one that had also tried to conquer this planet. Their records were incomplete, corrupted by time, but the warning had survived. It made no sense then. It made no sense now. But as he stared at the screen, watching the humans still fighting, still resisting, something inside him whispered, "You have made a mistake." Earth awakens. Inside the bunker, Dr. Carter's screen flickered. The energy readings from Earth's magnetic field were changing. The numbers didn't lie. Earth wasn't just resisting. It was attacking. Drake leaned in. What the hell is happening? Dr. Carter swallowed. Earth has seen this before. She pointed to ancient geological data, readings from thousands of years ago, spikes in energy, disruptions in planetary fields, and then mass extinction events that had nothing to do with nature. She looked up at Drake. They aren't the first ones to try and erase us. Drake's mouth went dry, and her voice was barely above a whisper. They all failed. The first warning. On the Cellary flagship, systems began to fail. The supreme strategist stiffened. Report. An officer's voice trembled. Sir, our energy core. It's collapsing. Xenar's eyes widened. Impossible. The officer shook his head. Something is interfering. We don't know how, but the planet is pushing back. The ship trembled. Lights flickered. A deep, ancient hum filled the air. The cleansing pulse weapon, something that had never failed, was shutting down. Xenar stared at the screen. For the first time in his life, a cold sensation crawled up his spine. Not fear. Something worse. A realization. Earth is not just a planet. It is something else. Something older. Something waiting. The second warning. On Earth, the skies darkened. Storms raged, winds howled, the oceans roared. The very elements themselves seemed to reject the Cellary. And then, for the first time, a message, one not sent by humans, echoed through the Cellary fleet. A deep, whispering voice, ancient, cold, and very, very clear. You should not have come. Xenar's blood turned to ice. The energy core of his flagship exploded. The cleansing weapon, unstoppable, undefeated, was gone. And in that moment, the supreme strategist understood. Every empire that had tried to conquer Earth had left behind the same message, a final testament. We should have respected Earth. The war turns against them. For the first time in the history of the Cellary Dominion, they were losing. Not to superior weapons. Not to overwhelming numbers. Not even to a stronger species. They were losing to something they had never understood. Something older than their empire. Something deeper than their calculations. Something they could not control. Earth. The aftermath of failure. The supreme strategist Xenar stood motionless in the command deck of his flagship, his eyes locked on the screen. The cleansing weapon was gone, not destroyed by human forces, not sabotaged by spies. It had simply ceased to exist. The energy readings made no sense. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a malfunction. It was as if the planet itself had reached up and crushed the weapon in its hand. The bridge of the Cellary warship was silent. Officers avoided eye contact. Data analysts whispered in low, fearful voices. This had never happened before. Xenar exhaled slowly. Deploy all remaining ground forces. A hesitant pause. Supreme strategist. An officer said carefully, Our machines are failing. Xenar turned sharply. Explain. The officer swallowed. Something in Earth's energy fields is interfering with our technology. Our war machines move slower. Our targeting systems are inaccurate. Even our biological units are disoriented. A strange, quiet hum filled the command deck. It took Xinar a moment to realize. It was fear. The Selleri did not feel fear, not like other species. They conquered. They adapted. They survived. But something was wrong. They were not adapting, and they were not surviving. The human counterattack. On the ground, Earth's forces launched a massive counterattack. Fighter jets strafed enemy lines, launching missiles at weakened Selleri walkers. Soldiers moved through the ruins, using guerrilla tactics, striking at key command points. Cities that had been on the brink of collapse pushed back. The Selleri were stronger. They were faster. Their armor was nearly indestructible. But they had never faced an enemy like humans. Humans did not follow patterns. Humans did not break under pressure. Humans adapted. A young pilot, flying a damaged fighter jet, dove through enemy formations, releasing a payload of homemade explosives onto its Selleri war machine. It stumbled, glitched, then collapsed. A resistance fighter hacked into a captured alien drone, turning it against its own fleet. A single squad of human soldiers, outnumbered 50-1, set traps instead of fighting head-on. When the Selleri advanced, the ground collapsed beneath them, a subway tunnel rigged with explosives. Across the planet, the invincible enemy was falling apart. The impossible reports. On the Selleri flagship, emergency alerts filled the command deck. We have lost control of Ground Sector 3. Our war machines are shutting down. Human resistance is exceeding all projections. Xinar's fingers curled into fists. His empire had conquered 10,000 worlds. They had never suffered losses like this. He turned to his top strategist. "Explain." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the humans are not just fighting us." Xinar's expression darkened. "Then what are they doing?" The officer swallowed. "They are learning." Xinar's mind raced. That was the secret. That was the problem. Humans didn't just resist. They didn't just fight. They studied their enemies. They adapted faster than any species that Selleri had ever encountered. Every fallen soldier taught them a new tactic. Every destroyed machine revealed a new weakness. Every battle made them stronger. For the first time, Xinar whispered words he never thought he would say. "We are at a disadvantage." The collapse of the Empire. From deep space, Selleri High Command had been watching the war. Their confidence was unshaken at first. Now it was crumbling. A message came through to Xinar's ship. The voice of the Selleri Supreme High Chancellor. Cold. Calculated. "You have failed." Xinar felt his entire body tense. "Chancellor, I request immediate reinforcements." A pause. Then the answer that sealed the fate of the Selleri Dominion. "No." Xinar's veins turned to ice. The Supreme High Chancellor's voice was emotionless. "The Dominion does not waste resources on lost causes. If Earth cannot be conquered, then Earth will be erased. We are activating Protocol Omega." Xinar's breath caught. "That would wipe out every Selleri unit, including you," the Chancellor finished. "You have 10 minutes before detonation." The transmission ended. The final betrayal. On Earth, human forces continued pushing forward, but Dr. Evelyn Carter's screen flashed with new energy readings. Her heart stopped. Commander Drake saw her pale face. "What is it?" Her fingers trembled over the keyboard. They aren't just retreating." She turned to Drake. "They're self-destructing." Drake's eyes narrowed. "What?" She swallowed hard. "The Selleri don't accept failure. If they can't win, they erase themselves." Outside, Selleri warships stopped firing. Their engines flickered. A deep, terrifying hum filled the air. They were turning themselves into bombs. Drake cursed. They'd rather wipe out the entire planet than admit defeat. Dr. Carter looked at him. How do we stop them? Drake exhaled slowly. He didn't know the answer. But Earth had one last chance. One final move. And if they failed, the war wouldn't just be over. There would be no Earth left to save. The last stand. Humanity's final weapon. The war was over. Not because the Accelerary had won. Not because Earth had surrendered. But because the enemy had chosen destruction over defeat. Above the planet, the massive Accelerary warships, once symbols of unstoppable power, were dying. Not from human attacks. Not from a superior force. From their own empire's orders. They had activated Protocol Omega, the final command for any Accelerary force that faced defeat. Every warship, every machine, every soldier would detonate in a massive energy burst, ensuring that nothing remained. Not Earth. Not humanity. Not even themselves. This was not war anymore. This was erasure. And Earth had 7 minutes before the sky became fire. The countdown to annihilation. In the underground bunker, alarms blared. Data screens flashed with red warnings. The Accelerary fleet was collapsing into itself, turning into a chain reaction of unstoppable explosions. Dr. Evelyn Carter stared at the readings. They're going to detonate. All of them. This isn't just a planetary strike. It's a system-wide wipeout. Commander Elias Drake clenched his fists. How do we stop it? Carter's voice was cold. We can't. A young officer turned from his console, panic in his eyes. Sir, there are too many. If even one detonates in the upper atmosphere, the explosion will spread through the entire planet. Drake exhaled slowly. They had fought for weeks. They had resisted against impossible odds. And now, at the very moment of victory, they were about to be erased by a dying empire's last order. Unless... The impossible plan. Carter suddenly stood up. Her hands trembled as she pointed at the data on the screen. There is one way. Drake turned. What? She swallowed. Earth itself. Its energy fields have already disrupted the Accelerary systems. If we amplify that disruption, if we can overload their ships at the right frequency, we might be able to force their reactors into a chain failure. Drake frowned. You mean, turn their own destruction against them? She nodded. A heavy silence filled the room. One mistake, and they wouldn't just fail. They would trigger the explosion even faster. Drake's jaw tightened. What do we need? Carter took a breath. Every remaining satellite, every radio tower, every single electromagnetic pulse generator we have. She looked at him. And we need to launch it now. Drake didn't hesitate. He turned to his team. Patch me through to every base, every pilot, every scientist we have left. He took a deep breath. This is our last stand. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Earth's final weapon. Across the planet, scientists and engineers worked desperately to synchronize the largest energy pulse ever attempted. Military pilots redirected satellites into position. Resistance fighters reactivated old transmission towers. Civilians ran into abandoned buildings, wiring anything that could send a signal. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was humanity's final move. In the command bunker, Carter adjusted the controls. Almost ready. Drake stared at the screen. The Accelerary ships were seconds away from detonation. The countdown reached 1 minute. Drake exhaled. Then, in a calm voice, he gave the order. Fire the pulse. The reversal. Across the planet, every transmission tower, every satellite, every device capable of broadcasting energy activated at once. A wave of raw electromagnetic energy surged into the sky, disrupting everything in its path. The Accelerary ships trembled. Their reactors flickered. Systems that were once indestructible now glitched, sparked, and collapsed. Inside the flagship, Supreme Strategist Sinar stumbled as the ship shook violently. Report, he barked. An officer gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. The energy, it's feeding back into our reactors. We can't control it. Dinar's eyes widened. Impossible. A deep hum filled the air. The ship's core overloaded. Sinar barely had time to whisper a final word before the screen went dark. Earth. Then, the Cellary flagship imploded. One by one, every Cellary ship followed. Not in an explosion, not in destruction, but in erasure. The silence after the storm. The night sky, once filled with enemy warships, was now empty. No fire, no explosions, no wreckage, just silence. Inside the bunker, the alarm stopped. The red warning lights faded. The battle, the invasion, the war. It was over. Dr. Carter stared at the screen. Did we win? Drake looked around. The exhausted soldiers, the broken cities, the millions who had fought, who had refused to be erased. He exhaled. Then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Yeah, he nodded. We won. Across the planet, the surviving humans looked to the sky. No more warships. No more invaders. No more fear. Just Earth. Still standing. Still undefeated. The last message. But as the world celebrated, one final transmission echoed across the stars. A warning sent from deep space, not from the Cellary, from something else. A voice, ancient and cold. We saw what you did. We know what you are. And we will come. The screen flickered. The transmission ended. Commander Drake and Dr. Carter exchanged glances. The Cellary were gone. But something else was watching. And humanity's greatest battle was just beginning. The fall of the invincible empire. The Cellary dominion was no more. For thousands of years, their empire had never lost. For thousands of years, they had crushed every enemy. For thousands of years, they had believed themselves invincible. Until they met Earth. Now, the skies above the planet were empty. No warships. No invaders. Only the wreckage of a once great empire, erased by its own arrogance. But even in victory, humanity was not safe. Because something else was coming. The last transmission. In the underground command bunker, the air was thick with silence. The battle was over, but no one cheered. No one spoke. Everyone stared at the blinking screen. The transmission had come from outside the galaxy. It was not Cellary. It was something older. A voice, deep, mechanical, and ancient, spoke in a language humanity did not know, yet somehow understood. We saw what you did. We know what you are. And we will come. Then the transmission cut out. Commander Elias Drake exhaled slowly, his hands tightening into fists. Dr. Evelyn Carter stared at the screen, her mind racing. That wasn't a warning, she murmured. That was a declaration. A young officer swallowed. Sir, if they know about us. He hesitated. Then what do we do? Drake straightened. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. We get ready. The fall of the Cellary homeworld. Across the galaxy, the Cellary homeworld, once the center of an empire that had ruled for millennia, was now a place of panic and fear. Their supreme leaders had seen the final battle. They had watched their greatest war fleet vanish. They had witnessed the impossible, a species that had defied them. And they knew what would come next. For if Earth could destroy them, then what would their other enemies do? Civilizations they had conquered now saw a chance for revenge. Rebellion spread across the stars. Former slave worlds rose in defiance. The Cellary High Council sent a desperate message into the void, a last-ditch attempt to save themselves. We request an alliance. We seek protection. We surrender. But the reply they received was cold and final. The strong do not beg. And then silence. One by one, their planets fell. One by one, their colonies were erased. One by one, The stars they had ruled went dark. The XLR had thought they were gods. But Earth had shown them the truth. They were nothing. The hidden enemy awakens. Back on Earth, Dr. Carter sifted through ancient records. There had always been legends, stories of lost civilizations, empires that had risen and vanished without explanation. For centuries, humanity had assumed they were just myths. But now, she wasn't so sure. She glanced at the final readings from the XLR fleet. Their technology had been advanced, but something had interfered, something older than both humans and XLR, something that had protected Earth. She turned to Drake. "We need to ask the real question." Drake raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" She hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Why has Earth never been conquered?" The truth buried beneath the surface. Deep underground, beneath the ruins of an ancient temple in South America, a forgotten machine activated for the first time in 100,000 years. It was not human. It was not XLR. It was something else. A signal pulsed through the void. A message sent to an unknown place, far beyond the edges of the galaxy. They are awake. The experiment is complete. It is time. Then, from the darkness of space, something answered. The incoming storm. A single object moved through the void. It was not a ship. It was not an army. It was something bigger. It had no name, no shape, no form that the human mind could comprehend. But it had one purpose, and it was coming for Earth. Not to destroy, not to conquer, but to see, to judge, to decide if humanity was ready for the truth. The battle for Earth was over. But the real war was just beginning. The Testament, a warning for the future. For the first time in history, Earth stood alone among the stars. The XLR Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, was gone. Their fleets were destroyed. Their homeworld was in flames. And the message they left behind, the final words of every lost empire, echoed through the void. We should have respected Earth. But even in victory, humanity was not safe. Because something else had noticed them. Something older. Something watching. The arrival of the unknown. It began with a whisper in the sky. Across Earth, astronomers detected an object moving toward the planet. Not a ship. Not an asteroid. Something alive. At first, it was invisible. No reflection, no heat signature, no radio signals. It was there, but only as an absence, a void where the stars should have been. Then, as it neared Earth, the whispers began. People across the world heard voices in their minds. Not words. Not threats. Questions. Do you know what you are? Do you know what you have done? Do you know what comes next? In the underground bunker, Dr. Evelyn Carter felt it first. A pressure in her skull, a presence behind her thoughts. She grabbed a pen, her hand moving on its own. When she looked down, she had written one word. Awaken. The forgotten past. Commander Elias Drake entered the room, his face grim. What's happening? Carter didn't look up. I think someone just made contact. Drake frowned. Who? Carter finally turned to him, her face pale. Not the XLR. She swallowed. Something else. Something older. Drake exhaled. I was afraid of that. He motioned for Carter to follow him. Together, they stepped into a secured chamber, where a screen showed the approaching object. It was massive, larger than any planet, yet weightless, drifting through space as if it was dreaming. And then, it changed. One moment, it was a void. The next, it was something else. A city. A battlefield. A billion shifting images, pulled from human history, morphing and reshaping, as if it was searching for the right form. Then the images stopped. The void became a single towering figure, humanoid, endless, unfathomable. And a voice, as old as the universe itself, spoke directly to them. The final judgment. Humanity. You have been observed." Drake and Carter froze. The voice was everywhere, inside their heads, vibrating through the walls, pulsing in the air. "You were meant to remain unseen. You were meant to remain unfinished." Drake's breath caught. "Unfinished," Carter whispered. "We were never supposed to survive." The entity continued. "And yet you have destroyed what was greater than you. You have risen beyond your station. You have become a force the galaxy did not expect." Drake clenched his fists. "So what now?" he demanded. "Are you here to destroy us?" The entity was silent. Then finally, it spoke again. "No." The tension in the room shifted. "We are not your enemy. We are not your savior. We are the ones who came before." The screen flickered. Data poured in. Images of forgotten civilizations, erased from history, species that had reached the same point as humanity, only to be wiped out before they could go further. Drake's blood ran cold. Carter's voice was barely a whisper. "This has happened before." The choice. The entity's presence grew heavier. The walls seemed to breathe. "Every empire that rose before you made the same mistake. They conquered. They destroyed. They became like the ones they fought. And so they were removed." Drake narrowed his eyes. "And what about us?" The entity's form shifted again. Now it was something else. A mirror, a reflection. 1,000 futures played across its surface. One where humanity became conquerors. One where humanity became prey. One where humanity simply disappeared. Then the final words came. "You have one choice. You can become like them and fall. Or you can become something new." Drake stared at the shifting form, his mind racing. "And if we refuse?" The entity's final words sent a chill through the room. "Then you will not be given a second chance." And with that, the presence vanished. The testament of a lost empire. In the silence that followed, Carter slowly sat down, staring at the blank screen. Drake exhaled sharply. "Well," he ran a hand through his hair. "That was something." Carter looked up at him. "They're not our enemy." "No." Drake's voice was grim. "But they're not our allies, either." A moment passed. Then Carter whispered, "So what do we do?" Drake straightened. His voice was quiet, but firm. "We write our own story." The cell area had fallen. The ancient watchers had judged, but Earth's fate was still unwritten. The galaxy was watching. And this time, humanity would not be underestimated again. The future begins now.